Hi, it's Grandma here, and I'm reading It's a Jungle Out There by Ron Snell, and we're going to read chapter 11. I don't know if you've noticed that the chapters seem to be alternate between one that's serious and maybe sad and another one that's funny. What do you think this one is going to be? It is bats and rats and status symbols, and here's the photograph. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be a chapter that has some funny stories in it, or is it going to be one that's a little bit sad? Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? When Terry got bitten by the vampire bat, I was green with envy. That summer we were living on the Camisea River. I suppose I must have been about 8, and we were having the time of our lives. Just upriver from us, there was a turbulent rapid. But right in front of the village, we had a huge sandy beach and a long backwater where we could swim, canoe, build sand huts to our heart's content. Luckily for us, just after we arrived in June, a mashiginga from upriver floated down to see us in a disposable canoe. To make it, he had cut down a special kind of palm tree that had a tall, straight trunk, with a big bulge in the middle of it, exactly like you'd picture a huge snake that had just swallowed an alligator. It was pretty easy to cut out the section with the bulge in it, hack open one side, dig out the soft, spongy stuff inside, and float off down the river. Of course, the little makeshift canoe weighed about a ton and would only hold 2 little boys, but we didn't care, and we spent hours paddling and poling it up and down our little section of the waterfront. One day, after another unsuccessful fishing trip on our canoe, we decided to see if we could spend the night on the beach. Dad, can Terry and I camp out on the playa tonight? We'll cook our own supper and everything. All right, if you don't know what the word playa means, you can kind of figure it out. He already said in the paragraph before, we decided to see if we could spend the night on the beach. And then he says, Dad, can we camp out on the playa? Playa is the Spanish word for beach. Sure, just make sure you take some mosquito nets and stay inside them while you're sleeping. Elated, we headed for the sandbar with our arms full of mosquito nets, cook pot, frying pan, blankets, bananas, crackers, popcorn, turtle eggs, and about 100 other essentials. It took several trips, so it was a good thing we were within sight of the house. I'll build the fire while you put up the mosquito nets, Terry told me. Building the fire was always the fun part. No, let's both build a fire and we'll each put up our own nets. I was a year younger than him, but I was on to his tricks. I headed off to gather driftwood while he shaved kindling. Then he got a tiny flame going, and we took turns blowing on it the way the Indians did. Once the fire was going, we put up the nets. How are we going to hold them up? I wondered out loud. There wasn't anything nearby to tie them to. Oh, let's just push sticks into the sand, Terry suggested. They'll stay up for one night. By the time we had organized our considerable gear, most of which we wouldn't have needed in 2 months, much less an overnight, it was time to cook supper. Sandy, who was 4 or 5 and never wanted to be left out of anything, had walked down to squat beside the fire and watch us. The mashigingas just watched from their houses. They got a big kick out of us going to so much trouble to spend the night 200 yards from a perfectly good house. But then we did a lot of things they couldn't figure out. Terry brought 3 big rocks over to set the frying pan on, and I poured in some cooking oil. It took a little work, but we finally got our rubbery turtle egg shells torn open and our turtle eggs mostly in the pan. Just about the time they started to sizzle and spatter and smell really good, the fire jumped into the pan, immediately turning both the pan and our turtle eggs into a blazing torch. We rushed to find something to grab the pan with so we could get it off the fire, then blew on it until the fire went out. All that was left in the pan was the barely recognizable black eggs. "Here, Sandy, you can have them," I offered generously, and she wolfed them down, thrilled to be a part of our campout. We went to bed early, but losing our turtle eggs left us a little hungry, even with the standby crackers and popcorn. So we fanned up the fire in the middle of the night to boil some cooking bananas. We'd just gone back to sleep when Terry woke me up. "Pandy, just knocked my mosquito net down. Can I get in with you?" Pandy was our little puppy, and he probably knocked the tent down by breathing on it. The way we put our nets up, if we had at least one mosquito net still standing in the morning, we considered our night a giant success. We checked our fish lines, which were still empty, and went back to bed crowded together. The mosquito nets were pretty essential. For one thing, rumor had it they would deter jaguars and ocelots. The Mashagingas told stories of waking up in the morning to find jaguar tracks all around their nets. Whether or not the stories were true, they did give us enough of a sense of security to fall asleep at night, so we used the nets and wouldn't have considered camping out without them. Since we didn't have mosquitoes in that area, about the only other thing the nets did was keep out vampire bats. They weren't even good for that if you didn't stay inside them, and Terry was a thrasher. That's why we woke up the next morning to find Terry had blood all over his face. So what do you think it is? Do you think one of the ocelots or jaguar found them? Do you think there were indeed giant mosquitoes? Or do you think it was a vampire bat? And there was a puddle of blood on his pillow. In his sleep, he'd stuck his head out and a bat took the bait. Since bats inject a bit of anesthetic and an anticoagulant when they bite, Terry hadn't felt anything from start to finish, and he kept bleeding long after the bat filled up and fluttered off. Melody was still too young to care, but Sandy and I couldn't believe Terry's good luck. "Wow, I wish I had a bat bite," Sandy said. "Terry gets all the good stuff." Most of the Mashagingas had little scars from bat bites, but no one in our family had ever gotten one before. And having a scar from a bat bite was about the best badge of honor we could imagine. Besides, you couldn't even feel it. I must admit that as much as I wanted to get a bat scar, I kind of left it to chance until I could get a bit by accident, as Terry had. Sandy, on the other hand, wasn't so patient. She slept for weeks with a corner of her net open and a little stalk of bananas inside. To our everlasting regret, neither of us ever got vampired. It would almost be worth a trip to Peru to try again. On the other hand, I did get stung by isolas, which is almost as good as being bit by bats, except they don't leave a scar. People just have to take your word for it. Now, isulas, I don't know what that is. I hope they identify. Otherwise, I'm going to have to stop reading and look it up. Here we go. Isolas are big ants. Well, big ants don't exactly do them justice. They're kind of like 1 1/4 inch monster ants, the way they sting and all. We've seen Mashaginga men writhing on the floor after getting stung, and Mashaginga men don't writhe just to impress their girlfriends. I was the only one of us kids to get an isola bite, so I was kind of special, even though my mom had already gotten stung once when she sat down in the outhouse. Since she might read this book, I'd better not assume where she got stung, but you can assume it wasn't on the top of her head. So where do you think she was stung if she was stung in the outhouse? And it wasn't her head. You think it was her behind? I think so too. When I got stung, Terry and I were playing across the river on a rainy day. I was kind of scrabbling along a slippery bank and reached into brushy places for handholds. All of a sudden, I felt a scorching pain in my hand. Ouch! I shouted, thinking that split second that I'd been bitten by a snake. I jerked my hand back in time to shake off 2 Isolas. Without even trying, I'd found a nest. The mad Isolas swarmed and threatened and made little oochie noises with their pinchers. And we got out of there as soon as we thought they might chase us. Terry paddled me home in the canoe, and by the time we raced up the bank to the house, the pain had spread all through my hand and was headed up my arm. Running hadn't helped, since it speeded up the circulation. When you're 8 years old and you know you're dying, you just don't sit down on the bank quietly to compose your final words. Dad and Mom put mud on the stings and gave me a bunch of aspirins, and I did my writhing in a hammock on the porch while the lymph nodes under my arms swelled up and I spiked a fever. My chigingas who came by all got to hear the story, and they laughed to show how sympathetic they were. Within 8 hours or so, the pain eased and I could brag about how cool it had been. Sandy wishes to this day that she could have been stung by an Isola, but she never went over and stuck her fingers in the nest. No guts, no glory. Okay, now, this chapter is called Bats and Rats and Status Symbols. We've already heard about the bat, and I guess we could throw the Isolas in for status symbols, but I think it's time for us to find out about the rat. I also had the honor of having had rats chew on me. I thought it was going to be a pet rat. Right behind our house in Yaranakacha were 2 huge African palm trees that the rats loved to nest in. Unfortunately, the rats had to go somewhere for food, and our house was handy. When we had cats at home, the rats weren't such a problem. One cat in particular was a great ratter, and when she had just had kittens, she'd bring a rat in nearly every morning. Mom wasn't thrilled that she always left the bloody carcass under our coffee table, but hey, at least rats weren't tearing the place up at night. When we didn't have cats, we had to be our own ratters, and I must say we had some really quality family time chasing rats in the middle of the night. It would start with Mom hearing a noise, creeping in her nightgown to the living room, and spotting the rodent. "Hey, we've got a rat in the house," she'd hiss, just loudly enough to wake some of us up. I think the rat wasn't supposed to hear her, but something that would wake us up would certainly warn a rat. Now, what I'm about to say might sound a little barbarian. What do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's going to be how they catch rats, or what they did with rats after they caught them? Well, we'll find out. But you have to remember that rats destroyed things and ate stuff, and worst of all, they chewed holes in Mom's Tupperware, which was more terrible than the unpardonable sin. And they never fell for the bait in our traps, so we had to be a bit more aggressive. Besides, they really did have the advantage, what with their speed and all. "Where is he?" In seconds, we tumbled downstairs, armed with barbecue forks, hammers, long-nosed pliers, and other proven weapons. Mom usually hunted with a broom, presumably so she could sweep the rat in our direction hockey-like. She would never have wanted to score with a rat, but she didn't mind an assist or two. Once we had a general area to search, the hunt began. Mind you, I'm not talking about your typical hunt where you slowly sneak up on the game and whisper and carefully take aim. I'm talking about a slam-bang, rip-roaring, screaming and shouting chase that took all of us over tables, under couches, up and down stairs, behind curtains, through cabinets, at full speed. "Here he comes. He's headed your way, under the chair. No, he turned around. Quick, look over there. Woo-wee, I missed him. Sweep, take the books off the shelf and see if you can find him with the pliers." Shouts of encouragement and despair ringing out in the night. The worst of it was that whenever the rat got cornered, he'd head straight back for us, and we'd have to jump out of the way and swing at him at the same time, which isn't as easy as it sounds. Trying to get out of the way of something you're trying to catch takes real coordination. For all of our bravado, we really didn't want to get too close until he was dead. Well, occasionally we succeeded after up to an hour's chase, and we went back to bed knowing that our house was secure for one more night. Usually we tumbled back in bed just knowing that there was a tired, scared rat somewhere in the house. In any case, our efforts didn't even come close to solving the problem, and I remember waking up some mornings with teeth marks in the calluses of my feet. Of course, the calluses were so thick that it didn't hurt and didn't leave any scars, and you didn't even wake up. So you'll just have to take my word for it. The fact that there wasn't any real evidence didn't keep me from bragging about it whenever we talked with our friends about how great our lives were. The competition for best scars was pretty tough. One of our friends at Yaranacacha, Heather Swanson, had the end of her toe bitten off by a piranha in the lake where we swam every day. The piranhas hardly ever bothered us, but Heather had a bit of blood on her toe and forgot to keep it moving. "I'm going to get revenge on that creep," vowed her brother Peter, who was addicted to fishing. True to his word, he caught the fish, and sure enough, his sister's toe was still in it. They put the toe in formaldehyde and took it to school for show and tell. I'll bet you've never been to show and tell where anybody brought a part of their toe in a jar that was bitten off by a piranha. At least I hope not. Another kid, Andy Lance, caught a big piranha and cut its head off right away. Then, just to feel how sharp its teeth were, he tapped on them with his finger. Quick as a wink, with a reflex action, the jaws snapped shut and bit a chunk out of his fingertip, even with the head chopped off. We had a tough time deciding which was better, getting your fingertip bitten off by a dead piranha or having part of your toe at school in the Battle of Formaldehyde. That would be a hard one to decide. Terry was even lucky enough to get speared by a stingray one summer. It happened on the first day of our vacation in Camisea and ruined his whole summer since he couldn't go in the river to play with us. Boy, did he have a dandy hole in his leg. He could stick a Q-tip in almost a whole inch before it started healing shut. He still has a round purple scar there, sort of like an old bullet hole. Sandy did come pretty close to having a great scar right on her face. As she remembers it, it was late afternoon, and Terry and I were helping the men in Picha cut the airstrip with 3-foot machetes. Mom sent Sandy to get us. "It's supper time. Mom wants you to come home," Sandy called. Terry didn't hear her, so she walked up behind him about the time he changed position and swung his machete back. It cut her right across both lips. Mom was in despair. "If only we had a doctor out here, he could stitch it up. Now she'll have a scar there for the rest of her life." Sandy could hardly believe her good luck. Without a doctor, the best Dad could do was put sulfa powder and a bandage on it and tell Sandy not to laugh or smile. Now, I can hardly believe this is true, but she swears that Terry and I tickled her to make her laugh, and that she had to laugh holding her cut lips together with one hand. For a long time, she loved looking at her mouth in the mirror, but eventually it completely healed without a trace. I didn't even get a good wound when a snake finally did bite me, and it was such a diddly thing I'd be embarrassed to write about it. In the end, the only permanent scars I have are from carving balsa wood airplanes and boats. Everyone in the whole world tried to tell us how we should hold the knife. Just so, and cut by pushing it away from ourselves, and use this thingy or that thingy to hold what we were carving. and on and on. I don't know how we'd ever have gotten any scars that way. People who carve like that must not care what their friends think of them. Well, now we know what we meant by bats and rats and status symbols. Have you ever thought of a scar as a status symbol? I can remember when I was a kid, I had a scar on my shin that I had gotten from a merry-go-round at the playground. I tried to jump on it as it was flying by, and someone had a park bench sitting nearby, and I didn't quite make it onto the merry-go-round, so my legs hit the park bench, and I still have a scar there today, but I'm not going to show it to you. Okay, that's all for today. Our next chapter is called Lonely Souls, and it sounds like a sad one again. But anyway, chapter 12 will be Lonely Souls. Okay, bye-bye.